Okay, today we have Keith Henderson from Velocity Minerals. Thank you for joining us, Keith.
Yeah, pleasure.
Yeah, so first question is, tell us about the company and your background.
Background first, I guess. I'm 51 years old. I'm from Northern Ireland. I have been a geologist for about 30 years, and I've worked all over the world in a lot of different things, a lot of different commodities, a lot of different countries, and I've been founding and running junior mining companies probably for about 10 or 12 years at this point. Velocity is an opportunity that came our way for Bulgaria. It was an interesting one because it's a project, which was our first project, Rosno, a gold project in southeast Bulgaria, but it also came with a partnership with a Bulgarian mining company called Gurupsu, and they have a CIL plant, so a vat leaching cyanide plant, which is a rare thing in the world. There are not very many of them. They're difficult to permit. This is the only one in Bulgaria, and really one of only a few in the region. So we thought that was an interesting combination. We thought it had some opportunities, and having a partner in Bulgaria, although we didn't know very much about the country at the beginning, we knew that working with a partner that we'd quickly become familiar and we'd be able to do good things. So now 5 years later, we're pretty much the biggest exploration story in the country. We're planning to grow substantially from here and try and develop Bulgaria into something that looks a bit more like Serbia.
Great.
Serbia has been a huge success in the last few years, and that success hasn't really quite arrived in Bulgaria yet, but we think it's coming.
Sounds like virgin territory a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Not too many people have been there yet, so that's always a good place to be.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us about your team and how they kind of have more skin in the game compared to some other teams.
Oh, yeah. So there's four of us that founded the company. 3 of us are on the board, and 2 of us are in executive management. We own 18% of the company together, so roughly 5-6% each. That's a pretty big position in a public company these days, and we've kind of maintained that position through time. So we really care about what happens to the company. We get paid. Everyone gets paid. You have to get paid in order to survive. But we're very aligned with shareholders. Like, this is a long-term deal for us, and we want it to go well, and we want those shares to be worth a lot of money at the end of the day.
That's great. So got some skin in the game. You guys, do you reinvest a little bit yourselves?
Yeah, like we participate in financings. We've kind of maintained the position as best we can. One of the key things we have is Daniel Marinov, who's one of the 4 founders, and he's a Bulgarian guy. He's worked all over the world for all kinds of companies, lots and lots of experience, but with this deal in the last 2 years, he's actually moved back to Bulgaria, and that provides us with an incredible amount of insight into how we're working there, just cultural context, contacts. It's been a really great move for us to have him actually join us in the country and become part of the team on a permanent basis.
Sounds like he's got some good experience.
Yeah, he's been everywhere. He's got lots of experience with geology, with exploration, also with communities. He's just done a little bit of everything, and he's done it all very, very well. So he's a great guy to have there.
Interesting. So what are the extra challenges in Bulgaria that you wouldn't see in North America?
Cultural. People speak Bulgarian, which will not be surprising, but they don't speak so much English. Certainly in Sofia, there's a lot of English spoken. So for me, I can walk into Sofia and chat to people, but I certainly can't do that elsewhere in the country where we're working with our partner. These are challenging languages. They're very alien languages to English speakers, so even if one kind of develops a little bit of skill, you're not going to be really able to have a conversation with people. So we rely upon Daniel Marinov for that reason, being Bulgarian, and also we have a really excellent translator who kind of follows me around when I'm there and really helps with that process too. But language is one thing, but culture is another thing, and how things actually happen. This was a planned economy. This was a communist state essentially, and now it's private. But private enterprise is a relatively new experience in the country. So it's a well-developed country. It's a fabulous place to invest. It's got a really low corporate tax rate. It's got a very favorable mining law. There's many things about it that are just great, but it's just a little bit different too. So you just have to keep all of those things in mind, and that's a challenge that you wouldn't have if you walked down to a project in Nevada.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's got some advantages politically. You know, when people hear other countries they're not familiar with, they always think possible politically unstable. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't feel it's unstable, or I wouldn't have invested there.
Yeah.
But for other people's benefit, it's an EU country. It's part of the European Union. It's been there for some time. I think that's ultimately where your security comes from. This is not Venezuela. The president's not going to walk into your office and tell you that he now owns your property. There's rule of law in the country. There's overriding EU regulation. There's environmental protections. There's everything operates in a very top class fashion, and we have to behave like a proper mining company, and we have to do things on the ESG side to very, very high standards, or else our projects won't go forward. So it's not so different to the rest of the world. I know it's not somewhere that North Americans are very familiar with, but being part of the EU is everything.
Yeah, no, I think that'll add some confidence to investors. So tell us, in terms of the company, what you think are the strengths and the weaknesses, and what are you working on for the weaknesses?
The only significant weakness we have right now is the current market conditions, and we can do exactly nothing about those. We're trading at about 0.2 to 0.3 net asset value, which is it's about there or thereabouts for companies like us that are developing gold-related projects. So we don't find any surprise in that, and neither is there anything that we can really do about it. It's just the way it's going to be for a while. We know that we're probably going to go into a recession. We know that the government will probably overcompensate on interest rates, and they'll backtrack on that. And eventually people will start buying gold again, and we'll be back where we were hoping to be this time.
Okay, so you guys are preparing for a little bit of a correction. So
I think so, yeah. Like, I think it's prudent for all issuers at this point in time to try and conserve cash. We have cash, and we have enough cash that will take us well through into next year if we're careful with it. And that puts us in a better position than a lot of other companies who find themselves, having planned to finance in September or October, find themselves in a hell of a difficult position right now. We also have a very interesting corporate structure. We have, as well as having 18% management ownership, we've got 32% with an issuer called Artemis Gold, based in North America. We've got 8% sitting with Dundee Precious Metals, who are a miner in Bulgaria, also TSX listed. We've got 13% with a high net worth individual in the United States who's a close personal friend of mine. This is a very chunky register, and that means that you can speak to, 80% of the shares with 5 phone calls, let's say.
Interesting.
But that also means that when you get into really difficult times, you're not relying on a standard retail market. It means that you never really run the same risks that other issuers run in terms of maybe going bankrupt or really just reaching the end and not being able to raise any money. I think we have enough very strong, significant shareholders that we can rely upon being able to raise money at some point. But we're going to be careful about when we do that. We don't want to do it right now. We're trading at 19 cents. I'm a shareholder. I don't want to dilute the company at these levels, so this is not the time, but the time will come.
Interesting. So it sounds that about 80% are in a small group of institutions and people, is what it sounded like? 20% would be basic retail?
There's the 20% I didn't mention is sitting with one institution called Leede Jones Gable in Vancouver, which is a number of brokers and their retail clients. So putting those guys into the mix, you get to about 90% of the stock, 91%. So it's got about a 9% trading float.
Interesting. That sounds much higher than typical.
It is, yeah. And it sometimes leads to a little bit of illiquidity. On the other hand, it also leads to really good things when the market's in turmoil and people are offloading stock. You just don't get into that terrible position where you lose all of your value.
Yeah, I mean, if retail investors are a little more fair weather.
Yeah.
So I can see you definitely have. That was actually one of my questions. It was a shareholder mix, so I appreciate you jumping into that. In terms of what would happen if gold drops 30%, what kind of challenges would you guys have, or whatever precious metals you're?
We would lose value. So trading at 0.2, 0.3 NAV relative to our peers is one thing. The only thing that's likely to change that is the gold price going down. So if the gold price goes down, so does our share price, and so does all of our friends' share prices and all of our peers' share prices, and that's what it is. It doesn't affect the operations of the company. As I said, we've got money. I think we can weather this storm. I think we can get ourselves through to next year. So yeah, short-term value, people's perception of the company, people's perception of precious metals as an investment destination, all of that's not very positive, but we all know it's coming back, so we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about that.
There's definitely a place for gold.
Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of future opportunities, exit strategies, mergers, or could you potentially talk about or you're shooting for?
Okay, so yeah, we're certainly in a growth phase in the sense that it's been not the greatest market for a while. So we're doing a bit more on the looking for acquisitions, looking for opportunities to acquire rather than on the very active exploration side. So, we're a company with about 650,000 ounces on the books. About 460,000 of that is in a reserve category. We have a pre-feasibility on one of the projects. We're reasonably advanced. We're permitting one of the projects, and that permitting will continue. So that all trucks along in the background in a sense. The acquisitions, the growth for the company is critical for us. We have to become a bigger exploration story. We have to get more resources in the books. So we've got about 900 square kilometers of ground in Bulgaria under application. The application process in Bulgaria can be a little slow compared to what people might be used to in North America, but these applications have mostly been in the system for quite a while, so we expect a lot of those to come out through the system and to be issued as licenses for exploration during the next 12 months. And so looking forward 12 months, we will have a lot more ground on our hands and a lot more projects to look at. The kinds of projects we're looking at are an interesting topic, and I'll just touch on that quickly because, one can go and look for grassroots exploration projects, and those are awfully high risk, and you can end up failing over and over again. And that's not necessarily what everyone's looking for in a bad market or an improving market, whatever the case. We tend to go for projects in Bulgaria that have had some historical work done. And so what I'm speaking about is maybe something that the Bulgarian state was looking at 30, 40 years ago. They might have drilled 20 or 30 holes into something to find a small resource. It's on the state balance. These are not 43-101 resources, but they're mineralization that's known. And those are the kinds of projects where we can really add value. So Rosno was like that. Rosno had historical exploration when we acquired it, and we were able to basically multiply that resource by 3 through about a year and a half of drilling. And that it allows you to move much more quickly. So you've got a project that's kind of got something there. You're not starting right at the beginning. It allows us at Rosno to go from starting on the first day through to a resource and through to a PEA in a 12-month period. And a year later, we had a pre-feasibility study done. If you're starting all of your projects from scratch at grassroots level, that really isn't possible. So everything that we're acquiring, we're trying to acquire things where there's just a little bit of knowledge there already, and we can move much more quickly.
Does that come more from talking to people and knowledge, or they have good mining records?
They've got very good mining records. You can drive to Sofia, go into the government offices. You have to pay for the information, unfortunately, but we do, and we go through the records and we find things and go, okay, this is something for sure we can add value quickly, and that's good value for everybody. Yeah,
it sounds like a good starting point for sure. Excellent. Well, let's talk about it at a macro scale. I'll ask everyone, when do you think gold is going to have its day? I was talking to a friend of mine recently who pointed out that about a year ago, gold was at an all-time high. And we sit here today in the depths of despair, wondering when this is going to end. It was only a year ago it was at those highs. Things happen quickly. Things will change again, and we would think that within a year we won't be having this conversation. We'll be in a different gold environment, and we hope. The only thing we know for sure is that we really can't predict exactly what's going to happen and when it's going to happen, but it's not there's a lot going on in the world that's impacting the economy. There's Ukraine. We've just come through a rather interesting pandemic. These are things that are not part of the normal cycle, and it never strikes me. I just never think that it's not going to be better next year. And maybe that's part of the explorationist in me. Maybe it's because explorationists have to be optimistic by their very nature, because we do fail. We're in a high-risk business. We fail from time to time, and we have to pick it up and start again. So our view of the macroeconomics tends to follow that train, I think. And we just assume that next year is going to be better. So any last comments you'd like to give to the audience about the company, or any extra insights? One of the most interesting dynamics with our company is that we have a deposit in Bulgaria that's, as the crow flies, about 20 kilometers away from Dundee Precious Metals mine called Ada Tepe.
Ada Tepe is a fabulous resource, a fabulous mine, high grade, short mine life, and in less than 4 years' time they run out of ore completely. And it's always been on our mind, and it's been on the mind of several people who are shareholders of ours or who become shareholders. You know, this looks like something that might add value to Dundee's portfolio. It's something that might, you know, it might add quite a bit of value. It might postpone the closure of that mine, because the mine was only built a few years ago, and in as little as 3.5 years, maybe it has to start closing again. And so, you know, for Dundee, we would assume that adding a resource like ours would make sense. And when you look at the region, there's only two 43101 classified resources within 50 kilometers of Ada Tepe, and we own both of them. And so it's an interesting dynamic. I can't speak to what is going to happen or what might happen, but it's something that we certainly think about, that maybe this comes into the mix when we think about where Rosno as an asset goes in the future.
Interesting. I did want to ask you a question on costs, since you're in another country. How would you compare it to the costs in like North America? I mean, you've got an advantage there for...
Substantially cheaper, and particularly at the moment, it's like 25 to 30% cheaper just due to the exchange rate.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, generally quite a bit cheaper. Labour force is very, very well educated, and I would add very hardworking, and really not costing the same kind of levels as you would expect to pay for professionals in North America. So there's kind of an inherent advantage there in terms of developing projects, that the workforce you bring in is going to cost you quite a bit less.
Interesting. Anything higher?
Energy costs are astonishing at the moment and terrifying. Electricity related to the gas coming from Bulgaria, from Russia, or rather not coming from Russia at the moment. So inflationary costs are an issue. I don't believe those will continue to go higher forever. I think they'll come back down again. So, but yeah, generally it's a cheaper environment. It's tied, their currency is, although they're in the EU, the currency is not the euro. It's tied to the euro, approximately 2 to 1, but it's not actually the euro, and that helps keep costs a little bit lower. If they will eventually aspire to having a euro currency in the country, and that will create more cost for sure. We've seen that time and time again in Europe.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you for your time, Keith.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.